We have sufficient food in the country. The food situation in the country is stable, and there should be no cause for alarm. What we are concentrating now is, together with the counties, to work on logistics of making sure that food reaches the people in affected areas in a timely manner so that we can avert and avoid any casualties from the effects of drought. As I have said, and it is important for the country to know, we have sufficient food stocks in the country. We have enough supply of food items in the country, and the prices are modest.
Tumepoteza zaidi ya watu watatu. Huyu ni moja. Tulipoteza wiki uliopita, tulipoteza mama ambaye anaitwa Chamkelo Kapelikarengan. Wiki ule mwingine tulipoteza mchama mwingine anaitwa Kileng Lotuduny.
Pia watu wanakufa juu ya njaa. Kwa hivyo mtu asipingane ati njaa hakuna ukula dokete njaa iko. Kama kuna mtu anaweza saidia kuja kusaidia watu, ajitolea saidie.
So tonight, almost 1 million Kenyans are facing acute food shortage occasioned by drought. Already, there are reports that Kenyans in worst-hit counties like Turkana are already dying. Reports that Turkana Governor Josephat Nanok has dismissed as false, and that pictures making rounds are not a true representation of the situation in Turkana. That is the big story that we're focusing on for you this evening. We also do know that Deputy President William Ruto said the government is in control of the ongoing drought situation ravaging sections of the country. As a matter of fact, 2 billion shillings has been set aside to sort of mitigate what's happening in arid and semi-arid areas. This is the big story. Thank you for joining us. I'm Linda Ogutu. So let's have this conversation with a lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's speaking to Dr. James Nyoro, who's the Deputy Governor, County of Kiambu. Sophia, good evening. Good to see you. James Nyoro has done substantive work on food security, and he's well versed with what we are facing right now as a country. I'd like to pick his mind, even as you speak to him, on what solutions now lies for areas like Turkana. I mean, these are areas that normally do not get that much rainfall. And we spoke to the governor as well, and he says he's waiting. They're now planning for the planting season, hoping that it will rain. So I'd like to pick his mind on that.
All right, good evening, Linda. Good to see you too. Indeed, I will be shortly speaking to Dr. James Nyoro. As you mentioned, he's the Deputy Governor, Kiambu County, but he was an advisor to President Uhuru Kenyatta on food security matters. So he's an expert in this area, very well versed. But a point you note there, even as we played what the Deputy President had to say earlier, and the residents from these drought-affected regions, is that there's a disconnect. The national and the county governments are maintaining that the deaths being reported in these drought-affected regions cannot be directly linked, or at least there is no evidence that they've been caused by the ongoing drought. But the residents are saying whether a person was unwell, whatever other situation, the fact that then they do not have food and water, that exacerbated, and to them is what caused their death. So a worrying situation. And let me bring in now the expert, Daktari. Thank you for making time for us. The main question most Kenyans are asking, because the Deputy President, we've had him speak just now, and he's saying we have enough food. That's the same thing the CS Devolution and Asals told me yesterday in studio. But for that person, Wanjiko in Turkana, in Baringo, and the other counties affected, who is waiting for food aid to arrive, if it indeed does arrive, does not think this situation is okay. So could we have avoided this, sir?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think we need to distinguish between the fact that the country right now, which is true, has enough food. I think 2018 was there was a bumper harvest, and we also that areas like Siaya and other arid and semi-arid areas were harvesting. But we need to distinguish the fact that food may be available, but the districts that we are talking about, the counties that we are talking about, Turkana, Marsabit, all of those, the people living there will not afford the food, even if it is available. We know very well that in olden days, the National Cereals and Produce Board had depots both in surplus and deficit regions. If you go to Marsabit, if you go to Turkana Road, you will find a depot there. What should have happened is because we know that the short trains almost failed in those places, despite the fact that 2018 was a good year. And therefore, by December, we knew that there's going to be some food shortage, some stresses coming in. And therefore, food should have started moving. This time, for famine relief, we are not talking about people in Turkana going to the shopping center and buying, because first of all, their livestock has been dying, and you know that. Whenever there is such a drought, what they do is livestock die. So we are talking about people who should have been fed by government, whether it's national or county government, by moving the food from surplus regions through the strategic food reserves, or through some intervention, emergency intervention by county government, and putting it into the depot by beginning of January, so that by February you start to distribute it to the people who are needing it, including water. So it's really a question of moving, being able to move the food from the deficit, from the surplus to deficit region. We also have to remember that the county and the national government are not the only operators in this area. You have several international organizations that are operating in these areas. National Drought Management Agency, NDMA, which you saw also commenting, is in charge, representing the national government. But we have FuseNet, which is the famine early warning system of the USAID. You have the World Food Program. You have a number of NGOs that are working in these areas. Yeah. And what they do is they monitor certain activities. One of the things that they monitor is the trekking distance by animals. As the trekking distance increases, you start to realize that that is showing you that you are moving to a crisis. So you need to respond. So what I'm saying is we had enough time to start moving the food from the surplus to areas where it's needed and avoid a situation whether people have died or not. Yeah. There is stress anyway.
There is stress anyway. That is why we are seeing the DP meeting with these CSs earlier today. So talk to me about then, in your view, where the ball has been dropped in this instance. The CS yesterday saying that this is a matter of county governments, agriculture is a devolved function, and so when Turkana County and these other counties have reached out to the national government, now they are responding. So is it the county governments that did not respond to this data and alerts that were given earlier on in good time?
I think simply we do not plan, and therefore we plan to fail. Whether it is the duty of the national or the county government, none of these can be said to have planned properly. Let's start with the county government. Let's take Turkana, for instance. From the normal allocation, Turkana is allocated about 10 billion shillings, equivalent higher actually than Kiambu. They also allocated $1 billion on what is called Equalization Fund under Section 204 of the Constitution. That is to cater for the marginalization of that county. So essentially, the governor in Turkana, Marsabit, and other places should have started mobilizing food by establishing silos in those areas that are needy. And knowing very well that the short trains are almost failing every time, they would have established silos there. And this time when we were told that nobody is buying food, maize from farmers in North Rift, the governors in those counties should have been buying maize to store in the silos. So that now from the silos, they have a distribution mechanism using the local NGOs, using their local staff, so that they would be moving to giving people food. Then at a certain point, they would say, look, national government, we are feeling that we are going out of our way. We don't have enough resources. This drought is too much, so the national government should come in. So the national government and the county government need to be coordinated. But let me tell you, there is no coordination between the national and the county government. And you saw even the meeting today with the DP, the county government was not represented. Even within the national government, the coordination is very poor. You saw the Minister of Agriculture with the Minister of Water, with devolution. Within themselves, at least it's good that the DP was calling the meeting because he can coordinate them. But within themselves, they are not coordinated. So when you say that you need to plan so that you have coordination between the county government and the national government so that you can move to help these poor people who are dying, there's no coordination at all. The second thing, as I said, is planning. You need to plan. We know perpetually that those people will be needing food. And whether you like it or not, then there need to be a standing committee, a standing disaster management committee that needs to be doing that.
Right.
But you don't get that. So there is failure on the part of both the county and the national government on this matter.
Yeah. Talk to us then for those Kenyans who the frustration is that we keep talking about the same thing over and over again, that clearly this chronic food insecurity every other time is being covered in the media, is happening, is a reality. People are losing their lives to this. How do we eliminate it? Is there no way to sit down and figure the fundamental problem and get to the root of it, as opposed to then keep going around in these cycles that are never ending? There
are solutions, because if you remember, 1984, Ethiopia suffered the biggest drought and famine, and the world came together and they sang and they brought relief. And the Ethiopian government decided never again will Ethiopia suffer from the crisis that we saw. Of course, there has been stresses, like 2009 when there was the Horn of Africa food crisis, but the government of Ethiopia has actually more or less eliminated this kind of situation. The first thing that you do in a situation where we are in now, as I keep on giving this example, if you are in a hole, don't dig deeper. Okay, stop digging and climb out of the hole. Right now, and I agree with the Deputy President, we are not in a crisis yet, because hopefully in another 3 weeks or 1 month, we are going to get some rains. This could have been worse if it was in May. So what we need to do immediately is to coordinate the relief efforts, using all the government agencies coming together so that we have a united, coordinated relief effort. We also need to have the coordination between as I said, between the national and the county government. But we need Kenya Red Cross. Kenya Red Cross have been doing a fantastic job. Remember, they've been marshalling Kenyans to come together to avoid a situation like this. Even where government have been making an effort, the private sector and Kenyan individuals come together.
But we pay taxes to the government, not Red Cross.
Exactly, yeah. We do. But I'm saying right now, because we are in a hole, and people may have died or may not have died, what we need to do is stop digging deeper, coordinate our effort, relief effort, and make sure that those people are given adequate food. Don't give them one gorogoro or one mkebe, because again, you see people rushing there and dishing out, and for another 1 month, nothing is. Let us give them enough food that will, take them through all this period. So that is the first stage. The second stage is these areas. We are told the rains will come. There will be flooding in those areas. We need to do those dams. We need to make sure that we capture the water instead of all the water going to the Indian Ocean, and then we start irrigating those areas so that we can grow food, we can grow fodder, and we can go. So in the midterm, we need to turn those places into green areas. We need to make sure that their livestock is prospering. So we need to invest. That is for the county government. It's also for the national government. In the longer term, Kenya must decide that it has a national Marshall Plan to make sure that this situation does not recur. I have talked about this thing for as long as I can remember, over 20, 25 years. So we need to have a Marshall Plan where the national government leads from the front and says, we as Kenya will never get this into this situation again, and these are the key milestones according to our Vision 2050 or whatever it is. So there are certain steps that needs to be done and done right.
Yeah, and yet the worrying part is, sir, as you speak, I'm just looking back and hearing the things you're mentioning have been seen in Jubilee's manifesto. If it's irrigation, the Galana Kulalu Food Security Project, that right now, not much is happening there. It's an issue. When we talk about harvesting, water harvesting, we keep talking about how important that is. The dams, it's a scandal in and of itself with the dams. So that it's not that these ideas have not been put in place. Is it the implementation of poor leadership at the heart of this? Can we call it as it is?
I think it's accountability. Manifestos are, as they are called, manifestos. We know very well that food and nutrition security is one of the big four. And the big question that we need to ask right now is what are the next steps in order to actualize food security as one of the big four. So we need to have social accountability. We need to have people holding the government accountable for some of this. We know the government has allocated money, like you say, Garana Kuraru. There's the issue about dams, the issue about water pans. There's the issue about provision of money. Yeah. But let me tell you, one of the biggest problems that we have to grapple with, and every Kenyan will have to say this, every time you finish a statement, you have to say this, is corruption. Because people are doing things not because they want them to succeed, but they are doing things because they want to make money out of that. This particular drought, I can assure you, it's going to create billionaires. Because what will happen is, and that's why you hear people saying declare it as a national disaster. Because once you have declared as a national disaster, and I have no problem at all with declaring it as a national disaster, you suspend all procurement requirements, you can buy anything, anywhere, and the end result will be that you make millionaires and billionaires out of this. So there are incentives for people not to respond and therefore have a drought. So accountability, social accountability, must be there. And we really, really need to remove this evil thing about corruption that you find all across the board.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned that, because there are those who are saying food aid is big business. So you are saying there are people who look at this as an opportunity because of the suspension of some of these processes in being able to get the money out, would abuse that for corruption.
Well, how many millionaires did we make when we were importing maize from Mexico? So yes, food shortage, food aid, and all of this is really big business for people, and corruption as it is has really eaten into the fabric of our society. So it's really, really unfortunate. Right. But I think we need to consider that issues such as food security, family leave, I don't care whether those guys have died of disease or have died of hunger or have died of whatever, but they have died. I think we really need to be serious about this and hold each other accountable as we move forward.
All right. Dr. Nyoro, thank you very much for making time for us. He's the Deputy Governor, Kiambu County, and also former Food Security Advisor to President Kenyatta, so an expert in that area. And Linda, important to note, because it's something that he touched on, and even as we continue with this conversation this evening, is that already the weatherman, as we're waiting for the rains to come, the short rains and all, there is a warning that even that may not pan out as people think. So that as a government is dealing with this situation as is now, perhaps things could get worse. And as Dr. said, planning and coordination critical, not only now, but also going forward, Linda.
Yeah, Sophia, because anytime there's famine, there's drought, there's a problem. When it rains, there's floods, there's a problem. So whichever way, there's a problem. So, and like Nyoro says, this is basically just lack of planning. I love how he says, this drought will make millionaires. That is why people are pushing it to be declared a national disaster. There are incentives for people not to respond. And this is a conversation that is important for this country. As Nyoro said, it doesn't matter how people died. The bottom line is they died. Yeah, so how did you get here? So let's continue having this conversation. We have Aden Ali Sheikh. He's Member of Parliament for Mandera South. He's also the chair of the Agriculture and Livestock Committee in the National Assembly. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. We also have Okisegere Ojepat, who's a food security expert. A little later on in this conversation, we'll be speaking to Josephat Nanok, who's the Turkana governor as well. I'm hoping... Am I able to see him? Yes, I can see him. Governor, good evening. Thank you so much for making time for us. So before I engage you, Governor Nanok, let me speak to Aden Ali, Member of Parliament, Mandera South. Sir, paint for me a picture of what's happening in Mandera with respect to this drought.
Thank you very much, Linda. First of all, it is a pity, it is shameful, and it's total disgrace that people have to die of hunger in this time and age. The statistics show 1.2 million people face starvation in Kenya today. That, as if that is not enough, we have another 14.7 million people who have no food. They have nothing to put on the dining table. And every year, we seem to follow the same cycle. And unfortunately, both levels of government, the national government and the county government, seems to behave like as if they have contract with God. And so they believe that, okay, it is the matter of rain. But I think this is leadership failure. This is as well planning issues. And the country doesn't have to be taken through such a cycle. Having said that, in Mandera County, we have over 200 people facing starvations as we speak. And unfortunately, two of the constituencies, one which I represent, Mandera South, and another one which is neighboring, Lafe, has had other issues of insecurity. And so those interventions that come from other government agencies or well-wishers are non-existent because of security issues. And so these constituencies are in dire need of aid. They are in dire need of assistance. And if the government doesn't move swiftly to be able to mitigate this, we will see a disaster in the coming days.
Mheshimiwa, I find it interesting that you sit in, you're the chair of the Agriculture and Livestock Committee in the National Assembly. Surely this warning signs, this concern should have been raised a little bit earlier, specifically from you, because this touches people you represent.
We are aware, and through it, I sit in the National Assembly Committee on Agriculture. We have had to send out this warning early enough. I've been talking to all the CSS, including the CS Eugene Wamalwa, for the last, I think, 3 weeks. I have even spoken to the Deputy President on the issue. We have now seen some movement, and I've been assured that in the next 1 week, logistical measures have been put in place, and those areas, the much needed support will reach them.
When did these conversations begin?
2 weeks ago.
Okay. So you sit in the National, you're the Chair Agriculture and Livestock Committee. This was predicted as early as January, and this conversation was had about 2 weeks ago. Great. Let me bring in Josephat Nanok, who's the Turkana governor. Sir, thank you for joining us. Okay, let me try and fix something with the governor, and then we'll get back to him. Okay, Segere Ojepat, food security expert. So give me your initial reaction to what's going on in the country. There's 2 billion that has been set aside for this. These are perennial things, year in, year out. What comes to mind?
Linda, this is a joke. We have had this conversation over and over again, and the government must just put its foot on the ground and decide what they want. We cannot continue having conversations such like this at a time like this, when we have all the experts, when we have all the information, when we have all the records. The Deputy Governor, Kiambu, has just said clearly that this country has not had any coordination. We knew long ago that there's going to be drought, and the indications came to us. And for me to see kind of movements moving now, this just indicates a level of insincerity, lack of seriousness from the side of government. And this is what I'll call corruption. Just like the governor said, Deputy Governor said, I think some people just line up pockets and ready to make money in a crisis like this. But let me just start by saying it's a crisis. It's unfortunate that 50 years down the line, we're still talking about drought, we're still talking about poverty, we're still talking about hunger, we're still talking about what we're talking about. I want to bring this very clearly. The country called Kenya has the best planners. The region is benefiting from our planners. And for this case, what we need to do is take action. I strongly believe, and this I will say straight without any fear, we have wrong people in the right offices, or people just don't know what they want to do with humanity, because why will a community suffer? We know Turkana has suffered many years. Every other day we are having the same conversation. And we can be able to afford to move fuel from Mombasa to Nairobi with such a sophistication. We have so much water in this country when it rains. We need to harness the water. We need to distribute the water. We need to take leadership on ownership as a country. And we need to agree as a country, what do we want? For this one here, it's very simple. People in Rift Valley are complaining they have maize in their stocks. Why don't we get this maize in Turkana? There's now a good road network between Kitale and Turkana. It will not take you 24 hours to get there. A record 8 hours, you'll be Turkana with food. Must we have people die? And then we start having this conversation. We have food in Rift Valley. People are holding food. The government has been unable to buy maize. The government has been unable to mobilize. And all we need to do is just mobilize and align logistics. And this country has everyone. We have the military. We have everybody we needed to do if we have to mobilize.
So
and
basically, we are not doing enough mobilization.
And I think for me, Linda, it's a time government got serious and stopped these jokes.
Okay. Devolution Cabinet Secretary said the counties are the first line in terms of reacting to this or responding to this. We've been speaking to Aden Ali, who's the Member of Parliament, Mandera South. Now, I'd like to bring in Josephat Nanok. He's in charge of Turkana County. We've had lots of reports from Turkana County. As a matter of fact, Brian Obuya, who's my colleague as well, was in Turkana, and he didn't paint a very good picture of what's on the ground. Governor, thank you so much for being part of the big story this evening. So from your perspective, the reports you've gotten from your team, describe for me the situation on the ground in Turkana.
Thank you, Linda. I've been following this conversation with your interviews with the members of parliament, and I think, and I'm glad that the media is bringing focus now to the northern Kenya, the arid areas that we've been talking of. I think if you followed very well, very recently when we had northern Kenya meetings in Garissa, in Malindi, the bigger focus was about the drought and water scarcity and the fact that our focus should be more on water. In fact, Turkana, the drought is severe now. As I've said earlier before, that this drought has not defeated our effort. We have just realized in the county that we needed the national government to support us because it's almost going out of hand given the intensity and the magnitude of how it is deteriorating. So far, the effort that we in the county, and we have also told the national government, is to unlock resources that are already in the budget for water, for livestock, for agriculture. So that now we focus, and also for disaster management, so that now we focus on what additional resources that we will require in the next 3 months to be able to deal with the expanded problem. I'm happy that the national government has allocated 2 billion shilling.
Yeah.
I believe that is in addition to the regular programs that are going on. We have asked them to unlock all the money that was allocated for water programs that have been stalled in Turkana. We will also be releasing all the money for water programs, for the livestock program, but also looking into our budget to see whether we can be able to get almost close to 700 to 800 million that will help us be able to provide food the next 3 months. Our strategy is the very severe areas we will go geographical targeting so that we can provide the very severe areas with 100% ration and caution all the other areas from deteriorating with a 50% ration.
Governor, I like what you're putting on the ground, the way forward, but this is my concern, respectfully, sir. These alerts were given early this year, some late last year. And it bothers me, and I'm sure it bothers a good number of Kenyans, that we had to get here where people probably are going for 3, 4, 5 days without food. And I know there's a contradiction on whether or not people have died as a result of this drought. I listened into the statement that was given today in the afternoon, and it's not clear whether these people died as a result of the drought. But these alerts were given early this year, late last year. Couldn't have something been done before we got to where we are?
Okay, Linda,
yes.
Let me just tell you, I have 15 years working as a humanitarian officer, but also my last 11 years as a politician has been basically 30% dealing with humanitarian work.
Yeah.
So essentially, Turkana has been associated with chronic emergencies. What we are witnessing now is not as worse as what we have seen in the past. It is not as worse as the situation that was there in 2017, which 90% of it the county government dealt with. In fact, the situation right now needs us to mobilize the resources that are existing in our budgets. And I think that is critical. It is not a time for blame gaming. I think it is time we work. So let's do a post-mortem much later. Just to give you a small comparison. Last year, in January, the malnutrition patients that were coming to our health facilities, in January we recorded 4,750 persons who were malnourished. This January, this January we had 4,150. Last January, the figure was 8,500. February this year, the figure is 3,171, which we are dealing with. Last year, the figure was 6,848. It can basically tell you on the side of malnutrition that what we dealt with last year it was much more numbers. However, we have now a multi-sectoral malnutrition survey out in the field so that we can reconfirm these numbers and together with the partners and the national government, plan accordingly to deal with any malnutrition cases that is going to come to attention.
I hear you, Governor, and definitely this is not a blame game. The concern that is on my head is that I do not want us to get to 2020 and we have a similar conversation. So maybe the next step of this conversation is what is the long-term plan? Right now we have the short-term plan. There's 2 billion being released. We are distributing food. This is where we're going to go, but long-term, what do we do? And we'll have this conversation when we get back on The Big Story. Stay with us. We're taking a short break.
This is KTN News.